A starter Rolex that cost $3,500 barely a decade ago now lists for more than double. Yet many of those watches sit unsold. Luxury watch brands designed artificial scarcity, while entry prices soared and buyers under 30 fled to smartwatches. So why are the world's most prestigious watches now quietly losing buyers, and what happened behind the scenes to trigger this reversal? The answer rewrites everything you thought you knew about exclusivity. A decade ago, a young professional could walk into a boutique and buy a Rolex Oyster Perpetual for about $3,500. Today, that same watch lists for over $7,000. If you can even find one at retail. For many, the entry point to luxury watches has quietly shifted from an attainable aspiration to a five-figure gamble. Consider Olivia, a 29-year-old architect saving for her first serious watch. She spent months researching, only to find that every reputable model she admired, an Omega Speedmaster, a Rolex Oyster Perpetual, even a basic Cartier, had doubled in price since she started looking. The Speedmaster that once anchored Omega's reputation for accessibility now hovers above $7,000. The Oyster Perpetual, once a starter Rolex, rarely sells below $10,000 on the secondary market. For Olivia, the dream faded into frustration. She put her savings toward a trip instead. Longtime collectors noticed the shift too. Mark, who bought his first Submariner in 2010 for less than $6,000, shakes his head at current prices. He says it is not about inflation or gold prices. It is the same steel, the same movement, but now the buy-in is double. He used to tell friends to start with an entry-level model. Now he tells them to wait. The numbers back up their stories. From 2012 to the mid-2020s, entry-level luxury watch prices routinely jumped 5 to 10% each year. The Oyster Perpetual's list price rose from $5,000 to over $10,000. The Omega Speedmaster Professional, a staple of first-time buyers, climbed from $3,500 to more than $7,200. These are not special editions or precious metals, just the most basic steel models, now priced out of reach for many newcomers. For younger buyers, the cost barrier feels less like exclusivity and more like a locked door. The promise of joining a tradition, of owning a piece of mechanical history, gets lost in the reality of sticker shock. As entry-level prices soar, the pool of first-time buyers shrinks. Instead of lining up for their first Swiss watch, many are simply walking away. A decade of waiting lists turned the simple act of buying a watch into a game of chance. Names were added to lists that stretched for years, but not all spots were equal. Dealers quietly reserved the most coveted models for their best clients, leaving newcomers in limbo. Social media and watch forums filled with stories of hopeful buyers offering to purchase jewelry or less popular watches just to move up the queue. For some, patience paid off. For others, the only way in was through the secondary market at a premium. The frenzy reached its peak in 2022. A single Patek Philippe Nautilus 5711 hammered for $152,000 at auction, nearly 5 times its original retail price. Dealers whispered about clients flipping watches the same week they picked them up, pocketing tens of thousands in profit. For a brief moment, it seemed like every steel sports watch was a golden ticket. Flippers, not collectors, became the main characters. One young trader who never wore a watch himself described the process as just moving inventory, like sneakers, but with more zeros. But underneath the hype, cracks began to show. As prices soared, the lines outside boutiques got younger and more skeptical. Generation Z buyers, raised on instant access and digital tools, questioned why a steel watch should require years of waiting and 5-figure checks. In interviews, many under 30 described mechanical watches as performative, a word that stings in an era obsessed with authenticity. For them, the Apple Watch or a fitness tracker gets more daily wear than a Rolex ever could. Industry surveys back it up. Among consumers under 30, smartwatches now outsell mechanical watches by a wide margin. The paradox is hard to ignore. The harder brands push scarcity, the more disconnected they seem from a generation that values flexibility and transparency. The auction highs and waitlist games may have fueled headlines, but they also fueled doubt. If you are enjoying this story, hit like, subscribe, and let us know in the comments. Do you think luxury watches are still worth buying, or is the era of watches as status symbols coming to an end? Your thoughts shape where the conversation goes next. On the secondary market, the story that every luxury watch is a safe bet has started to unravel. After the frenzy of 2022, flagship models like the Rolex Daytona 116500 GOLN have tumbled from over $50,000 at their peak to the high 20s of thousands of dollars, a drop of nearly 50% in just a few years. The Tiffany Blue Oyster Perpetual, once the darling of auction headlines, is forecast to lose up to 71% of its value from its top price. Dealers who once sold out inventory in days now talk about watches sitting for months, with some describing their shops as drowning in inventory. Gray market discounts have quietly widened. Where buyers once paid huge premiums to skip waitlists, many models now trade below retail. A Daytona that fetched $38,000 in 2022 might be listed at $27,000 today and still linger unsold. On Chrono24 and Watchbox, the spread between the list price and what buyers are actually willing to pay has grown wider than ever. Margins have evaporated for dealers who stocked up during the boom, and some are now facing the threat of bankruptcy as unsold inventory piles up. One dealer confided that every week more watches come in than go out, and the phones are quiet. Collectors who once bragged about flipping watches for quick profits are now holding on to pieces that have lost their luster and their upside. The old promise that a steel Rolex or Patek would always outpace inflation or stocks has started to look shaky. As the secondary market cools, the myth of guaranteed appreciation is fading fast. For anyone thinking of a watch as an investment, the numbers tell a cautionary tale. Swiss watch exports to the United States fell by 39% after new tariffs hit in September 2025. The impact rippled across the industry as brands scrambled to redirect unsold stock to Europe and Asia, flooding those markets and pushing prices down for all but the rarest models. Official figures from the Federation of the Swiss Watch Industry show that while export values are projected to grow at a rate of 3.7 to 6.9% through 2026, the number of units shipped has dropped sharply, down 30% compared to pre-pandemic levels. This means fewer watches are selling, but each one is more expensive than ever before. For legacy brands, the dilemma is stark. On one hand, their business models rely on steady price increases to maintain the illusion of exclusivity. On the other, a shrinking pool of buyers threatens the long-term health of the market. Bain & Company's lead luxury analyst points out that the growth in value masks a troubling reality. The market is getting smaller, not larger. She says we see a polarization. The ultra-wealthy continue to buy, but the middle has hollowed out as inflation eats away at disposable income and tariffs inflate retail prices. The once reliable mid-tier buyer is disappearing. More consumers are spending on travel, dining and digital experiences instead of physical status goods. The traditional playbook of raising prices, restricting supply, and leaning on heritage now risks alienating the very audience that once fueled the industry's rise. FH export officials admit privately that the demand problem is not just cyclical, but structural. Brands are caught, cut prices, and risk undermining their prestige, or hold firm and watch relevance slip away. For now, most choose the latter, even as unsold inventory grows and the market's foundation quietly shifts beneath their feet. Today, Swiss watch exports are projected to slow, and Gen Z's appetite for status symbols keeps shrinking. As luxury pivots to experiences and digital identity, the industry faces a choice: adapt or fade into niche obscurity. The value of time is changing, just not on anyone's wrist.